morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on when you're watching this, and welcome back to our Capital Markets and Investment Day agenda today. Delighted to be running the intro for our next panel now, which is focused on corporate venture capital, titled Corporate Clout in Biotech Ventures. Along the right-hand side of the screen, as I mentioned earlier, there are the Q&A and questions boxes, so please do keep your questions coming in for our panel today. And indeed, if you're watching this a little bit later, maybe in a different time zone, continue to ask those questions and put them in the chat and questions box. We can get to them throughout the event. So yeah, delighted now to hand you over to our moderator for today's session, Lucie Ellis. So Lucie, the stage is yours.
Great, thanks, Josh. Hi, so I'm Lucie Ellis, the Executive Editor for Vivo, part of the Pharma Intelligence Group. Happy to be chairing this session today, and we've got a great lineup of people from the CVC area to talk about biotech, corporate clout in biotech ventures, so a good topic to get involved in today. To start us off, I'm going to jump to who I can see in order on my screen, and hopefully we'll follow on with that, to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their investment style to get us started as well. So Laia, you're first up.
Thank you very much, Lucie, and a pleasure to be here. So my name is Laia Crespo. I'm the head of investments in Europe at Sanofi Ventures. And a little bit about the fund. We invest in early stage biotech and digital health companies with innovative and transformative new projects of a strategic interest to Sanofi. So we are a strategic corporate VC. We have a global reach with offices in Boston and in Paris, and we are a team of 6 professionals, 6 investors. In terms of therapeutic areas of interest, we focus, our big 2 areas are oncology and immunology. We also have a strong interest in rare genetic diseases, including rare blood diseases, as well as vaccines, which is an exciting topic these days. And I look forward to participating in this panel and to answer many of your questions.
Great, thanks, Laia. Adam.
Hi, thanks, Lucie. So my name is Adam Houghton. I head up AbbVie Ventures, which is the CVC for AbbVie. Our focus is also on early stage innovation, so several years from the clinic in therapeutic areas of interest to our corporate LP, which is AbbVie. And those areas are oncology, immunology, neurodegeneration, and more recently ophthalmology after we acquired Allergan. So our investments are usually fairly small, usually in kind of the 1 to 10 million price range. And we remain committed investors throughout the lifespan of that company. We have about 7 people spread across the US. We've been pretty US-centric in the past, but have started to make more investments recently in Europe. So look forward to being part of this panel. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Adam. Nice to see we've got some interest in oncology. I've got a couple of questions coming up for you in that area. Jürgen.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jürgen Eckhardt. I'm the head of Leaps by Bayer, which is the name of our corporate venturing activity. I joined Bayer roughly 5 years ago to basically start and lead that effort. We actually call Leaps by Bayer a strategic impact investment unit, strategic because we are also doing this with a view to basically help renew Bayer's technology portfolio over time and help to remain at the forefront of innovation. And impact because we're really going after technologies that could change the way how we do healthcare today. So against that background, we have done a number of investments in the cell therapy space, gene therapy space, oncology related deals, autoimmune related deals. So we have a quite broad set of therapeutic areas that we can cover. They can or cannot align with today's Bayer pharma business. We can also make sort of orthogonal investments to the current Bayer strategy. And it's a pleasure to be here and engage in the discussion with everyone.
Great, thank you. Finally, Jasper.
Well, thanks a lot, first of all, for inviting me here. I'm Jasper. I'm the Managing Director of N Ventures. We are the corporate investment fund of Merck. We are a 400 million evergreen investment activity And we are probably a little bit more diversified than my other colleagues here, because we not only invest in healthcare, we also very actively invest in life science tools and technologies. And we do strategic investments in the semiconductor and display industry space as well. And this is really has to do with the strategic character of our investments. We serve basically the different businesses of Merck with, I would say, forward-looking disruptive technologies, where the goal is to invest and create relationships with entrepreneurs, with small companies that develop technologies that could disrupt the way we do business today. So really thinking about how can we actually create relations with companies that are going to change healthcare, going to change life science tools, technologies, going to change materials in 10 years from now. And we use equity investments to actually get to that goal. Very simple, and I think Adam, Jürgen, and Laia use exactly the same, have exactly the same perspective. If, as a corporate investor, you've been on the board for many years, you've supported the company, created a good relation, it's much easier to then actually put them in touch with the right people in your parent company and say, hey, listen, why don't you, no strings attached, go and have a discussion and see if there is actually an interest to do more. Sometimes that works. In the times when it doesn't work, it doesn't matter, because we have a dual mandate that is based around, first of all, strategic investments, secondly, financial return. And I think that is enough for now. I'm really delighted to be here, spending time with, I think, people that we all know very well, because we have more than one investment together, I think, with every single one of you.
Great, that's interesting as well, and something I want to come back to, which is a little bit of how you do work together. But touching on some of the things you all mentioned there, so oncology is obviously a big thing at the moment. Jasper, you mentioned a bit more disruptive technologies, but digging into that, what are some of the sort of hot technology areas that you're attracted to? What are some things that you've seen in the last 12 months that have caught your eye? Perhaps starting with you, Jasper.
Well, thank you. Well, I think still precision oncology is, I think, still one of our biggest topics. And this is something where we still see a lot of opportunity, especially also when you think about the field of DNA damage repair, for instance. We have multiple companies in that space by now. So I think we're a little bit, I would say, over-invested there, but it also shows that we believe that this is simply a very exciting field. Other fields in oncology include anything that relates to the use of novel therapeutic modalities. And of course, I'm pretty sure Jürgen will tell much more about that with their recent investments in the cell and gene space. But this is also very much on our radar. And I think one outlier to really throw in here is the effects of COVID have had a tremendous effect on the investor sentiment around remote patient monitoring. So this is certainly something we're now actually looking into, and I think it's something that's really coming to age. And if you're representing a pharma company, you can either bring a new drug to the market and find a new market, or you can actually expand existing markets by offering healthcare to more and more patients. And I think the latter is now also very much in focus.
Great, thank you. Jürgen, what are some of the hot technologies that you've been interested in lately?
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot what Jasper was saying, I could just nod my head. You know, for us, it's digital certainly has been a topic, and you know, in the sense of digital biomarkers, in the sense of remote patient management, but also in the sense of you know, in vitro drug discovery using AI and machine learning. We have invested in that space as well. So digital definitely is an important topic. On top of that, I would maybe mention the whole cell and gene therapy space, right? And we are really looking sort of at technologies there in 4 different categories. One is, you know, for a good cell and gene therapy solution, you need the cell, obviously. And that's one element, and there are different approaches. Then you need the gene editing capabilities. That's sort of the second pillar. The third pillar is you need delivery technologies, you know, to get your payload to the tissue that you want. And then the fourth pillar is really that whole synthetic biology. You know, these are the promoters, the switches, on-off switches, etc. So we are sort of thinking in those 4 categories, and we have made investments in this space. Yeah, so maybe I stop here for a second, but that's sort of technologies that we are super excited about.
I think it's interesting. Digital's sort of been in the fringe for a while, but obviously 2020 has really rocketed efforts in that space. But oncology is something a few of you mentioned early on. Laia, have we reached sort of peak in oncology in terms of investment and pipeline?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that there's still a few more years in which we will be seeing that most of our deal flow is in fact in oncology. And Sanofi has positioned and announced publicly the desire to be stronger in oncology. And areas, just to pick up a little bit on the topic, on the previous question, areas that we particularly find exciting is the whole cell therapy space, including NK cells, for example. There's been a number of deals with pharma, including Sanofi on that space, and CAR-T as well, CAR-T and gene therapy as well for oncology. So I think oncology is here still for a few years, and it will, when we analyze our deal flow and put the metrics on therapeutic areas, we'll still see that oncology is very much on the top.
And Adam, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with the comments just made. Look, so much capital is going in oncology that, there's so many biotech companies, so many researchers working in that area, that I think that's going to continue to develop, and there's going to be more science and innovation there. Hopefully some of that kind of spreads over to other therapeutic areas. As an immunologist and somebody who did research in autoimmune, I kind of wince a little bit when I see the small number of companies coming forward in the autoimmune space and a growing number in neurodegen. So I think that's important to kind of think, especially in this, what will hopefully be the post-COVID world in the not too distant future. What developments will happen in innate immunology. But getting back to oncology, that is where we see the most innovation, particularly to novel modalities. And that's one of our key focuses.
Yeah, I think obviously we're seeing all of you within that sort of space. Sorry, Adam, did you have anything else to add?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what happened there. My computer completely froze. So do I do the carry on and pretend nothing happened?
Yeah, carry on from there. Well, everyone's used to this now in virtual.
Okay. So yeah, getting back to oncology, that's where we see a lot of the novel innovation, new therapeutic modalities that could be applicable to those other therapeutic areas. And Jürgen was just talking about cell therapy, gene therapy. What will the next generation cell therapy be? So I see a lot of potential still in oncology.
When we're talking about sort of seeing that scale where oncology is huge and other areas sort of follow behind, how do you balance sort of interest but competition and overcrowding in areas when you're looking for new investments? Adam, perhaps to start.
Partially it is a function of deal flow. I would say probably 70-75% of the investment opportunities we see are oncology. I think what we try to do is make efforts to seed more companies, say in immunology and neuroscience, to kind of help redress that balance a little bit. But obviously, we have a thoughtful process where we try and balance our portfolio. And I think probably at the moment it's 50% oncology and then 25% neuro, 25% immunology. But it's, again, like I say, it's more a function of what you see and then also what you can create. At AbbVie Ventures, whilst we have done actual company creation and we regularly do seed investments, we aren't actually geared to creating new companies. When we are involved in that, usually we'll partner with an institutional investor that has the operational skills to pull together a management team around the science. So that's where we try and redress the balance through company creation.
And any other thoughts from the panel, sort of how you manage overcrowded areas or high competition?
Yeah, I can comment on that. So the way that we have tackled that and approach this is by investing more in neurology, for example, which traditionally has been a more neglected area. Not anymore. It's been active over the last couple of years, but traditionally it's not been as active as other therapeutic areas. So we have a number of investments in the neurology space, as well as in the rare disease space. So this is where most of our portfolio is heavier in rare diseases, and we will continue to do that. And we hope to do more investments in the rare blood disease space. So that's another area that we are interested in.
Great, thanks, Laia. Jürgen.
Yeah, we don't have sort of a fixed sort of therapeutic focus. We like to look at the science and the technology and see where that leads us to, right? So while of course our operating division pharma is focused on their existing therapeutic areas, we don't see that as sort of excluding us from looking at technologies that could lead us anywhere, right? And of course, some leads us into oncology. We all know that, right? But we have made investments in spaces such as, xenotransplantation, right? Using animal organs to basically replace organs in humans who are waiting on waiting lists, who are dying on waiting lists for transplant organs, right? And we just saw a opportunity there with the new gene editing tools to find, this has been a decade-long dream, that we could use animal organs to replace maybe a kidney in a human, and it has never worked, right? And we see now with the gene editing technology, we see that technology could really work, right? If you can knock down those epitopes that cause the graft versus host reaction, then finally we may have a solution for that. So that's what I just mentioned that to illustrate, we follow the technology, see what sort of impact we could have in whatever disease area. And if we are convinced and compelled by the proposition, then we follow that path.
Great, thank you. That's really interesting to hear a different example as well. Jasper, any thoughts?
Yeah, on our end, we are a little bit more restricted by the current therapeutic areas where Merck has an interest in, which is oncology, immuno-oncology, immunology, fertility, and I would say broader therapeutic modalities. But I think actually challenging you a little bit on crowded area. Yes, oncology is crowded, but I actually see oncology as many, many different types of indications. So for me, you can't talk about oncology as one big bucket. To me, oncology is the forefront of all R&D, and basically all the research in novel modalities that is now taking place is being financed with the dollars that are going into oncology, which is where I think after 5 to 10 years, we will see a switch in using the novel modalities that are now being developed more or less exclusively for oncology, like some of the PROTACs, the E3 ligase companies that we see popping up here and there. We are going to see applications in immunology. Because for me, it's also a matter of target validation. And there are simply more validated targets in oncology that are unexplored. And given that one of our primary objectives for an investment is to be first in class, I think that will really drive us automatically towards oncology in that sense. Notwithstanding the fact that we are doing pretty exotic things, not xenotransplants like Jürgen, but we have a dedicated fund that invests in what we call in between and far beyond science, where we are, for instance, the largest investor in Mosa Meat, which is an in vitro hamburger company. So we do these kind of things to secure the future for Merck, but we don't do them with sponsorship from our healthcare franchise.
Okay, I think that's interesting to hear how that works, and a good point that you make about sort of oncology and what the future sort of pathway is there and how that feeds into R&D in general. Any other thoughts from the panel on that suggestion?
I think that's a very interesting comment, Jasper, and we've seen that in our portfolio. So one of our portfolio companies, Chimera, working on protein degradation, had we announced a deal with Sanofi, with our parent company, earlier this summer for immunology, in fact. So the driver was immunology and not oncology. And it was a very nice deal with up, I don't know, 150 upfront and up to 2 billion in milestones and royalties. So I think the interest from pharma is definitely there. And we were very happy to see that that was coming from one of our portfolio companies.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you, Laia. One of the questions I had when I've been talking to my team and said who I was speaking to today, and they're interested in sort of that not invented here syndrome. Is that still something that you see when you're working to bring things into your portfolios? And how do you combat that if that is still a thing? Jürgen.
Yeah, so I can just speak for Bayer. You know, I don't see that really. Bayer is very open to sort of open innovation, right, and external innovation. That's really a priority for us. While we of course have great respect for all the in-house research that's going on, it's really just a small fraction of all the researchers in this world, right? And we are fully accept and that most of the inventions will probably come from external. And therefore, I think everyone in Bayer is really super open-minded to external innovation. Having said that, I can appreciate that it may come across differently in some cases, but I think it's because, you know, we have sort of our in-house puzzle and we're looking for missing pieces, right? And unless, you know, a startup's proposition fits into exactly a missing piece, then the answer may be negative, right? Which doesn't mean that it's a not invented here syndrome, but we may have other activities, other relationships, or in-house programs in a similar space. That's why we have to say no, right? But overall, I think, and I'm sure it's true for my colleagues and their parents as well, you know, everybody in this world is very much open to external innovation and collaboration.
Yes, but how do you think things have changed with sort of in terms of open innovation and things coming in from external sources?
Well, I think it's very interesting because we are more of an almost generalist investor in the sense that we do investments in novel material sciences, life science tools and technologies, and I would say more deep tech, apart from the healthcare investments we do. So we deal with completely different universes. And if you take a look at what is the norm in healthcare, which is basically you in-license assets and you develop these assets with pharma. I would say 65–70% of the pharma pipeline, your typical average pharma pipeline, is probably in-licensed, has originated from elsewhere. If you compare that to what happens, for instance, with life science tools and technologies companies, which are basically buying revenues, or you're talking about more materials type companies, it's a completely different world. So whereas we don't see that not invented here syndrome in our healthcare businesses, we have seen it for quite a long time, and a reluctance to do venture deals actually on the materials side of Merck, which is of course a world leader in liquid crystals, for instance. But then again, Merck is now a company that depends on inorganic growth. So really open to external innovation. And I would say the fact that we're sitting here all on this call, our prime reason for existence is to bring innovation in. So if not invented here was such a problem, we probably wouldn't be sitting.
Great, thank you. Adam.
Yeah, I'd just add, just to kind of add the AbbVie experience, I think number one, getting rid of the not invented here syndrome is definitely a function of leadership. And it was interesting, our CSO, Tom Hudson, recently estimated that he spends 30% of his time on external innovation. So whether that be licensing or being involved with us on the ventures side. So I think when internal people start to kind of see that dynamic, they recognize the value of external innovation. Then the other thing I would add, I think what we do as corporate venture groups actually helps reduce that not invented here. We look to make investments in science that isn't being executed within AbbVie's R&D organization in potentially transformative and exciting science. And so with there being no overlaps, there's no issues with not invented here. But then as a strategic investor where we want to build connections between our portfolio companies and our R&D organization, you start to bring down those barriers around not invented here because you get familiarity with the teams, you get familiarity with the science. And then like Laia was saying, when it comes to our corporate partners potentially thinking of doing a deal with one of our portfolio companies, it just makes that process more science focused rather than kind of on emotions of, this isn't coming out of our walls.
Yeah, and I would add, fully agree with the rest of my colleagues in this panel. And I would add that from Sanofi's perspective, Sanofi has grown by acquiring a number of companies. So the whole non-invented here syndrome is it doesn't exist, because we are a big family of companies with Genzymes, Syntrorix, Uplinks, Bioverative. So these are all researchers that we get to interact when we do diligence for potential investments. So we haven't encountered that particular aspect, luckily.
Great. On a slightly different topic for you then, when we're seeing sort of ever bigger Series A and B rounds that are sort of commonplace now in Europe and the US, are you getting involved earlier or later than you perhaps were before? And are you syndicating more or less, do you think? Laia?
Yep. So it is true that over the last maybe 12, 18 months, with our deal flow has the number of opportunities that we see that are earlier stage has increased, and the rounds are larger. We continue to apply our process in which we like to syndicate with institutional investors, and we feel that the best syndicate is that of a combination of corporate and institutional investors. And obviously we will need to adapt to the change in the market if all the deal flow would be now, I don't know, super early as there is only a target and no preclinical data. But we still see a fair amount of companies that come with preclinical data and data in animal models, that this is what we like, to see. That's our sweet spot. So early efficacy and a little bit of safety data. But we are very flexible in the sense that we have seeded investments in the US, we've done more later stage investments in Europe, we've done companies that are financed, we've done investments in companies that are about to enter clinical trials. We did an investment in vaccines that we announced in December in a company in Denmark, Minervax, that is single asset and clinical stage. That's a little bit outside of our scope, but just to say that as corporate investors, I think we can take a much broader and flexible approach in terms of building a portfolio and a stage of development of the different companies, as well as patient capital, being a little bit more flexible in time to exit. So that allows us to have an additional level of flexibility, which when it comes to early stage deal flow, we are able to adapt very quickly.
Great, thank you. Other thoughts then on sort of how things are changing in earlier stage investments in those sort of Series B and A rounds that we're seeing? Jürgen?
Yeah, sure. So I actually think it's a good thing to put substantial financing rounds together, even at an early stage, because if you do that, you allow, first of all, you're probably able to attract the best caliber of people that you need in these startups if they see that there is substantial funding available. You also help the entrepreneurs and management to really focus on developing the science and not constantly thinking and working on talking to investors and refunding. So we are, we like that trend towards larger A rounds, seed rounds, and we have been party to these actually ever since we started at Leaps. We have been party to some really significant A rounds in the 3-digit million levels, and we're happy to do that. To continue to do that.
I think Adam was keen to add something there.
I think from our perspective, and maybe kind of give a little bit of, we don't have a defined fund. AbbVie Ventures invests off the balance sheet, and we have a budget of around $50 to $60 million US per year. So for us, as these deals get more expensive, it does, make us focus more on the seed and the Series A, and actually they account for 90% of our new investments. I think Jürgen makes a great point about, these large rounds really do help the team focus, but there's also a flip side of, if they're not appropriately tranched and you've got milestones in there, sometimes there's this kind of riches attitude where it's, the money goes very quickly. And we've actually seen that with some of our larger investments in the past. So we try and manage that a little better. I think the large rounds are good, if you kind of set the milestones appropriately, with the other investors.
Very good point, Adam. If I may just quickly react. Of course, we also are strong supporters of having tranched deals, right? I wouldn't put all that money in upfront, right? But you think about the plan over the next 3-5 years. You define sort of milestones that you think you should achieve, and if you achieve these milestones, then you will have the money, and that just helps that you don't need to waste your time with constant fundraising.
Yeah, no, I agree completely.
Yeah, I think let me maybe add a slightly different perspective to that, but first let me give you where we are, I think, with Ventures. We do, in essence, two different things. One is we go earlier, way earlier, but we already syndicate these deals. So we did Forks Therapeutics last year, spin-off of a Swiss university, basically a 10 million round with 4 absolutely leading VCs. There's absolutely nothing there yet. It's really it's assay development and then going into chemistry, but very, very early stage, well trenched, but I would say flexibly trenched. And that works really well, because one thing that I absolutely hate, it's refinancing companies and having to go out and having to spend excessive time trying to find new syndication partners because you can't fill the round up yourself. So that's also where those very large rounds come in, which is great. And we've done a few of these 100 million Series A, Series B rounds indeed last year. For us, the challenge is we are still a relatively small investor. So for us, it's really a trade-off. We go in later stage with very large rounds, except that we will be having less of a say than we prefer. And on the other hand, we go in earlier and we try to do syndicated deals very, very early on. The comment on trenching is super interesting, because it's always something where I am a little bit in doubt, because I have literally seen companies being managed just to survive getting to the trench. So, and it's very risky, because if you have a very rigid set of investors, and this is where some corporate investors are very known for, and it's not people around this call, but there are some, you can find yourself in a situation where you have to argue as a syndicate and as a board, you have to argue that the milestone that you set 2 years ago is completely no longer relevant. And still you have a management team that's dead set on achieving a milestone that's by now completely meaningless. So I am all for good use of capital, but I'm even more for making sure that as a board, you have a thorough understanding of where you want to take the company, and you're able to reset that every 3 to 6 months, really adjusting that goal. Because I have literally seen companies go close to down the drain simply because of wrong trenching.
Any other thoughts on that topic?
I think we're all violently in agreement on that. I think it just kind of shows you the complexities of, the deals that we do. Sometimes small is good, sometimes big is better. But it's how you manage it, how you manage the companies.
This is really disappointing, Adam. I was hoping now to finally throw in something controversial, so we get a real discussion where we actually would no longer agree, but it looks like we're all in agreement.
I can be a little bit controversial, even though I agree on most of the points. I think there is a risk on raising very large Series A when companies are very early stage, which is that you lose a little bit the sense of being disciplined with the capital, and that's a risk. And even though I fully agree with you, Jasper, on your comments on setting up milestones that are well defined and revisiting those milestones, it is not always easy to just not disburse the future milestones and continue with a story that maybe with a smaller seed, you would have validated the concept, yes, no, and if it doesn't succeed, then you shut the company down. If you are already invested with a large round, 3, 4, 5 parties with milestones that you revisit, you are tempted to just continue funding the company, and maybe the company has not delivered. So there is a little risk here as well.
I fully agree. And I think everyone has been there. It's the fallacy of sunk cost again. Mm-hmm. And people keep falling for that. So no, I fully agree. And it's difficult to be disciplined and to have that sense of urgency when you have 30 million in the bank and you know that it can last for a while. I think we've all been there. And I think it's something that rigid milestones are not the answer, but a laissez-faire approach is also not the answer. So I think, again, agreeing with Adam and also with you, is really a flexible approach and really being on top as management and board and also having the right board in place very, very early on.
Yep. I think quite a few of you mentioned early on being more involved in sort of company creation nowadays as well. How critical is it that you get the right management within those companies that you're creating, and what do you look for in that kind of talent?
Well, maybe I shall start. If we do company creation, we expect these companies to be able to survive in stealth mode for, I would say, up to 2 years. So what I'm really looking for is not a guy in a shiny suit or a person in a shiny suit who can actually present well and who sells the story. What we're looking for is a person that can actually generate value, because this is a person that understands the science, understands drug discovery, and can help us create substance. So really getting someone preferably with a dedicated level of experience from out of pharma, excellent medchem, CSO capabilities, and really getting that level of persons in is really critical, because you have to build the value inflection, and then you can start to only build the rest of the management team. So we really take I would say, a substance approach rather than an approach towards someone that can raise money for you, that has excellent ideas and a vision. But this is really for our therapeutics companies.
Any other thoughts on that, to sort of management talent?
I agree completely with Jasper. Again, he's probably disappointed again. But yeah, it does change, through the life cycle of the company, the early stage, the seed stage. You want the scientifically driven people to do those critical experiments. I think you need somebody who can recognize and plan what those experiments are, and be willing to work to failure, which is sometimes kind of the antithesis of what scientists want to do. But I think, once you have that data and you're ready to go out to a Series A, that's when you start to think a little bit more about the management team, to Jasper's point, who has those connections with the institutionals and the corporates to raise that financing, and start to think about the future strategy of the company, the growth of the company. So very much we look at these things in stages. The initial is prove that science, and then get your research plan and business plan together.
Yeah, if I may just add, whenever we are sort of creating companies ourselves, we always do that, first of all, with partners. And as we said earlier, if we create new companies, we usually put together a syndicate that can carry that company for 2, 3, 4 years, right? So, and if that kind of money is around the table, then we're not really worried about hiring someone who has fundraising experience, right? And we're really worried about someone who can provide content leadership, who knows what he's doing, right, in the lab or wherever, right? So we don't really need someone who is good with investors and can raise money, right? So I think just seconding what Adam and Jasper have been saying, right? I think content leadership is much more important at that stage.
Laia, any other thoughts?
Nothing to add here. No, I think, in agreement.
And how do some of you think about the way that you have to adapt depending on that stage of company? So what you're offering to different levels of development, how do you have to think about that approach and that change?
Yeah, I guess if then these companies mature, right, then hopefully they will get de-risked over time. They will have reached some of their milestones, and we may be 3 years into it. And at that stage, then you start to think about, okay, how does the executive team have to get broadened, right? What skills are we missing? Then you also start to think about, particularly in this great financing environment, then these companies start to think about crossover round and IPO, etc., right? Then all of a sudden you think, okay, now maybe we need a CFO who has done this before, right? Maybe we need to expand our executive suite with talents that we need at that stage. So that's, I think, how this evolves over time. But in the initial years, I think it's all about, the content and the science.
Great, thank you. As we're coming towards the last sort of 5 to 10 minutes of our discussion, I want to leave you all a bit of time to get your crystal balls out and thinking about 2021. Obviously 2020 threw things into this industry and all sectors that nobody could have expected or prepared for. But what is it that you're concerned about as you look forward into the sort of next 12 to 18 months? And what are some of the things that you're excited or interested about. So if we run down the line, Laia.
I think let's start by the positive. So I continue to be excited about the science, and I think there is terrific science out there, and it's a great moment for investors. There is a lot of capital around, so it's a great moment for investors and for entrepreneurs to set up companies and to continue backing good science in many areas, in many therapeutic areas, as well as across many different modalities. As we were saying, gene therapy, cell therapy, these are areas that we will see more and more companies being backed by VCs. In terms of the challenges, I think 2020, we saw a huge number of IPOs that was probably unprecedented, and most of them are very early stage. So the jury is still out there on what will happen with these very early stage companies if they do not manage to continue raising funds to finance their clinical trials. So I think this is one of the risks that we may see in 2021, probably not during the first half, but during the second half. I think there may be a shortage of public money for some of these very early stage companies that IPO'd in 2020.
Great, thank you. Adam.
Yeah, so I'll say I threw my crystal ball away last March when I said that the capital markets would never be this strong after a pandemic and lockdown. So I have no way of looking at the future, but at the moment things look very positive from a financing perspective, from the amount of good science that's coming through. So really no kind of worries there, and it's hard to see what is the what's going to be the event that pops the IPO bubble at this point. But that then kind of relates to my concern as a strategic investor. And as I say, we do this to be better connected to the science and better connected to the companies. And when a company goes public, we step away from our investment. So as that timeline from company creation to IPO becomes shorter, the reason for us doing these investments, also becomes less or shorter. So just a kind of a little bit of a small concern, but it's something that we're thinking about.
Great, thank you. Jürgen.
Yeah, overall, I think the prospects are really bright, right, for our industry. I mean, people are calling this sort of the age of biorevolution, right? And I think we see that coming to fruition in so many different ways. If you just think about it, a year ago, this pandemic started, and within a year, we have several approved vaccines. I mean, if that's not illustrating the potential and power of biotech, then I think that should convince everybody, right? So I'm super bullish that we will see more and more breakthrough innovations in our industry. And for the financing environment, sure, the public markets, they may take a hit at one point. They will take a hit at one point. But I don't think it would immediately translate into sort of the venture market, because these funds the venture funds have raised so huge funds over the last 12 to 24 months. So that money still needs to be invested. So I don't think, as a biotech startup, you should be fearful not getting funded over the next 2-3 years. I think there's plenty of money available. And even if we see a hit in the stock markets, hopefully that will not change the picture fundamentally.
Finally, Jasper, your thoughts?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with all my colleagues. I think we're living absolutely in a unique time. I mean, the understanding of biology and modes of action that we have today, and the novel modalities that we're able to generate, I think what we're going to see in the coming 12 to 18 months is more of a revolution in the use of AI in chemistry. So probably you will see more startups that are able to actually get from hit to IND at unprecedented times. And I think that is going to be absolutely amazing. With the amount of funds that still have been raised, typically the way I see it is venture funding lags the capital markets by 2 or 3 years, simply because people have raised money now and they have to spend it. There's so much cash out there in early stage that still for the coming 3 years, whatever happens, I think we still will be pretty good. So for me, these are, I mean, coming out of having started at M Ventures in 2009, went through that whole crisis, tried to get companies funded that we were the only investor in for 3 years, speaking to hundreds of investors, no takers. I mean, these times have fundamentally changed now. So I think these are amazing times.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you all of you. I think that was a really interesting discussion and nice to get some lively debate going even on the virtual platform that we find ourselves on. So thank you guys, and I'll just hand back to Josh for now.
Fantastic, thank you, Lucy. And yeah, of course, thanks to our panel, to Adam, to Jasper, to Laia, and to Jörg as well. Please do keep your comments and questions coming in on the right-hand side there in the Q&A and questions box. You know, if you're watching this at a later date, please do keep asking questions. The platform is open for full 2 weeks for partnering, indeed, to watch this content. So I'm sure these questions can be answered by our panel, and keep the conversation going with your fellow attendees as well. We are back very shortly with our next session, which is focused on early stage investment with, I guess, some different perspectives, more on the sort of seed and Series A part of the investment life cycle. So please do join us there. See you very shortly, and thanks again to our panel for today.